My mom made my little sister write "I love mommy more" on a picture of our dad, then beamed as his face fell. When I begged her to stop competing for Emma's love, she rolled her eyes and said, "She already picked her favorite. I'm just making sure she doesn't forget." I stayed silent. That was 5 months ago. This morning, she was dragging her fingernails down our backyard fence, screaming Emma's name, while blood ran from her hands. When my 7-year-old sister told her she loved dad more, Mom was making dinner when Emma ran up to her and yanked on her skirt. "Mommy, mommy, come, Daddy's wearing my Elsa costume. He looks so funny." Mom chuckled but said she was too busy to go look, and Emma jokingly responded, "Ooh, I'm mommy. I cook. I'm too boring to have fun." She then giggled. "That's why I love daddy more." She ran back to play. Mom laughed it off, but I could tell by her eyes that comment really stung her. The next day, Mom joined in on the fort building after dinner. She crawled through the blanket tunnels with Emma and even did silly voices for the stuffed animals. When Emma asked for ice cream after dinner, Mom said yes immediately. Dad raised an eyebrow, but Mom just winked at him, then proceeded to make Emma laugh by getting ice cream on Dad's nose and licking it off. A few days later, I watched Mom and Emma rolling down the hill in our backyard. Mom's expensive birthday sundress got completely ruined with grass stains and mud. Dad looked horrified, but Mom just shrugged. Memories matter more than dresses. We all thought it was extremely cute. Until then, Mom's actions started becoming more than just fun. Dad came home from work with a new puzzle for him and Emma to do, and when Mom saw it, she immediately announced that and Emma were going for ice cream. "Just us girls tonight?" Dad's face fell, but he didn't argue. Even worse, this became a pattern. Every night, Mom would plan some special activity for her and Emma that excluded Dad completely. I remember one specific Saturday during family drawing time the next day, Mom kept whispering to Emma. I watched her encourage Emma to draw Dad with a frown and write "I love mommy more" at the top. Dad saw the picture and his shoulders slumped. Mom just beamed like she'd won something. A few days later, Mom got finger paint and started painting directly on our living room walls with Emma. When Dad tried to stop them, Mom grabbed Emma's hand and they ran outside giggling. Me and Dad spent 3 hours scrubbing the walls clean. 2 days later, I was looking for Christmas decorations in the attic when I caught Mom lifting Emma through the opening onto the roof. The roof had no safety rails and slanted sharply. I screamed at her to stop and she rolled her eyes. "We're just having fun. You're as boring as your father." The car incident happened on a Tuesday. Dad and I left Emma and Mom in the car while we went into the store to grab snacks. But when we came out, what we saw made our jaws drop. Emma was behind the wheel of Mom's SUV. Mom was in the passenger seat urging, "Press harder on the pedal, sweetie." Emma pressed too hard and crashed straight into a parked vehicle. The owner came rushing out minutes later. Dad immediately took the blame and handed over his insurance information plus $500 in cash while Mom was telling Emma she did great. That night, I went to check on Emma. She was curled up in her princess bed, and when I sat down, she whispered, "Mommy is starting to scare me." Dad and I staged an intervention the next morning. We sat Mom down and explained she was frightening Emma with these dangerous activities. Mom's face went red. "You're ganging up on the fun parent. Emma loves me more now." She said so. We tried to reason with her, but she stormed out. The next day, Dad discovered Mom had drained their entire savings account. $4,000 gone. He found the receipt. She'd bought a massive commercial-grade bouncy castle for the backyard. "Emma will love this," she said when confronted. I came home from school a few days later to find Emma in the backyard holding Dad's axe. Blood was running down her leg from a gash. Mom stood nearby clapping. "Come on, sweetie, this is fun. Don't mind the cut. Tough girls don't cry." Emma looked like she was about to sob. I grabbed the axe and Dad carried Emma inside to bandage her leg. Mom followed us yelling about how we were ruining everything. That night, we sat Mom down and told her very bluntly, she either stops or Dad and I are leaving. She scoffed at first, but when she realized we were serious, she agreed to let up. Well, that lasted for an entire 2 days. That's when we got the call, directly from Mom. She was sobbing so hard we could barely understand her. I messed up real bad. Come to the hospital now." We broke every speed limit getting there and found Mom in the ER waiting room. Her clothes were soaked and she was shaking. Through hysterical sobs, she explained what happened. She'd taken Emma to the old quarry for swimming fun. She kept encouraging Emma to jump into the water from higher and higher rocks. She told us Emma was scared, and after jumping from 20 feet and twisting her ankle, she told Mom she didn't want to jump anymore. Mom cried, saying she had a bad gut feeling and knew she should have stopped, but she wanted to be the fun mom so bad. She practically bullied Emma into jumping from the 30-foot rock. The rock there was salty and slippery. Emma misplaced her leg while taking the leap. She hit the shallow water wrong. Mom said there was a huge crack and Emma wasn't waking up. She was alive when she brought her in, but doctors said they couldn't promise anything. We waited in the ER for 12 hours. When the doctor finally came out, they broke the news. Emma's spinal cord was almost fully severed at L2. She might never walk again. It was the first time I had seen Dad cry in my life. They let us see Emma briefly after another hour. She was sedated but awake. When she saw us, her eyes shifted to Mom. "You scare me, Mommy, get away from me." The hospital security guard approached us and asked Mom to step outside. She started protesting, but Dad grabbed her arm firmly and walked her to the hallway. I stayed with Emma, holding her small hand while machines beeped around us. Her eyes kept darting to the door, making sure Mom wasn't coming back. Through the window, I watched Dad's face turn from grief to something harder. His jaw clenched as Mom gestured wildly, clearly trying to explain herself. She kept pointing back toward Emma's room, but Dad blocked her path each time she tried to return. The doctor came back with a clipboard and started explaining Emma's condition to me since I was the only family member present. He showed me x-rays on a tablet, pointing to the damaged vertebrae. The words partial paralysis and extensive rehabilitation floated past me. All I could focus on was Emma's tiny form in that massive hospital bed. Dad returned alone 20 minutes later. His eyes were red, but his expression was determined. determined. He kissed Emma's forehead and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he turned to me and motioned for us to step into the hallway. Outside Emma's room, Dad pulled out his phone and started making calls. First to his mother, my grandmother, asking her to come immediately. Then to his brother, a contractor who lived 2 hours away. Each conversation was brief and urgent. He kept glancing back at Emma's room between calls. Mom appeared at the end of the hallway, trying to approach again. A nurse intercepted her, and I heard raised voices. Dad didn't even look up from his phone. He was scrolling through something, his face growing darker with each swipe. Later that evening, Grandma arrived with an overnight bag. She hugged us both tightly, then went straight to Emma's bedside. Emma's face relaxed slightly when she saw her. Grandma had always been her safe person, the one who read her bedtime stories and made her favorite cookies. Dad pulled me aside while Grandma sat with Emma. He showed me his phone screen. Mom had already posted on social media about the tragic accident with crying emojis and requests for prayers. The comments were full of sympathy and support. Nobody knew the truth about how it happened. The next morning, Emma was awake and more alert. Physical therapists came to evaluate her. They moved her legs gently, testing for sensation. Emma winced but couldn't feel anything below her knees. The therapist made notes on her chart while explaining the long road ahead. Mom tried to visit again during shift change. She'd brought a giant teddy bear and balloons. The nurses had apparently been instructed not to let her in without Dad's permission. She left the gifts at the nurse's station, and I saw her crying in the elevator as the doors closed. Dad's brother Vlad arrived that afternoon. The two men huddled in the corner of the waiting room, speaking in low voices. Vlad kept shaking his head and running his hands through his hair. I caught fragments of their conversation about emergency custody and documentation. Emma had her first surgery 2 days later to stabilize her spine. We waited in the surgical waiting room, Dad pacing back and forth while Grandma knitted to keep her hands busy. Mom showed up halfway through, but hospital security escorted her to a separate waiting area after Dad spoke to them. The surgery went well, but the surgeon's update was sobering. Emma would need months of physical therapy. She might regain some function, but walking normally was unlikely. Dad's fist clenched so tight his knuckles went white. That night, while Emma slept, Dad made more phone calls. This time to the bank, to his insurance company, to his employer about family medical leave. He was building something, preparing for something, though I didn't fully understand what yet. Mom sent me dozens of text messages, photos of Emma as a baby, videos of them playing together, long paragraphs about how sorry she was. I didn't respond. Every time my phone buzzed, I remembered Emma's terrified face when she'd asked Mom to leave. The social worker visited on day 4. She interviewed each of us separately, asking careful questions about Emma's home life and the events leading to her injury. The pattern emerging here reveals how Mom's need for validation completely overrides her parental judgment. Notice how she frames every interaction as a competition with Dad, rather than focusing on Emma's actual needs or safety. Dad had prepared a folder with printed screenshots of Mom's social media posts, bank statements showing the drained savings, and photos of Emma with the axe wound. Emma started physical therapy while still in the hospital. The therapist helped her do simple exercises, trying to maintain muscle tone in her paralyzed legs. Emma tried so hard, her face scrunched in concentration, but her legs wouldn't respond to her commands. Mom managed to sneak in during a shift change. I found her standing over Emma's bed, stroking her hair and whispering apologies. Emma's monitors started beeping faster, her heart rate spiking. She kept her eyes squeezed shut, pretending to sleep. I pressed the call button and told the nurse Mom wasn't supposed to be there. Mom turned on me, her face twisted with anger. She accused me of poisoning Emma against her, of taking Dad's side, of ruining their special bond. Security arrived before she could say more. Dad moved fast after that. He met with a family lawyer recommended by Vlad, gathering all the documentation we'd collected. Photos of the finger paint on the walls, the receipt for the bouncy castle, medical records from Emma's axe wound, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen Mom putting Emma on the roof. The house felt empty without Emma's laughter. Dad and I took turns staying at the hospital, making sure someone was always with her. We brought her favorite books, her stuffed animals, anything to make the sterile room feel more like home. Mom's behavior escalated. She showed up at my school, trying to convince me to talk to Dad on her behalf. She called Dad's work repeatedly until his boss had to get involved. She even contacted Emma's teacher, spinning stories about Dad keeping her from her daughter. One evening, while Dad was meeting with the lawyer, I sat with Emma as she ate dinner. She could only manage a few bites of the hospital food. She asked me in a small voice if she would ever walk again. I didn't know how to answer. Grandma moved in temporarily to help. She cooked meals, did laundry, and made sure I got to school on time. She also stood guard at the hospital, turning Mom away when she tried to visit during Dad's shifts at work. The medical bills started arriving. Even with insurance, the costs were staggering. Dad spent hours on the phone with billing departments, insurance companies, and the hospital financial aid office. The stress showed in the new lines on his face. Emma had good days and bad days. Sometimes she worked hard in physical therapy, determined to regain feeling in her legs. Other times she just cried, asking why Mommy made her jump from the rock. The therapist said the emotional trauma might take longer to heal than the physical injuries. Mom hired her own lawyer. Papers arrived at the house demanding visitation rights. Dad crumpled them up and threw them in the trash, then retrieved them and smoothed them out, knowing he'd need them for documentation. Vlad helped Dad install security cameras around the house. They put new locks on all the doors and windows. Dad didn't say it out loud, but we all knew he was worried about what Mom might do next. Emma's 7th week in the hospital brought a small breakthrough. She felt a tingling sensation in her left foot during therapy. The therapist warned us not to get our hopes up too high, but Emma smiled for the first time since the accident. Mom's social media posts grew increasingly erratic. She shared old photos of her and Emma with captions about being kept from her baby. She tagged Dad's employer, my school, even the hospital. Dad documented everything, adding it to his growing file. The night before Emma's discharge, discharge, we had a family meeting in her room. Dad explained that she'd be coming home, but things would be different. We'd converted the dining room into a bedroom since she couldn't manage stairs. A wheelchair ramp was being installed. Physical therapists would come to the house 3 times a week. Emma listened quietly, then asked if Mommy would be there. Dad knelt beside her bed and promised he would keep her safe. She nodded, trusting him completely, though I saw fear flicker in her eyes. As we prepared to take Emma home, I thought about how much had changed in just 2 months. Our family was broken, maybe beyond repair, but Emma was alive, and that's what mattered. The real battle was just beginning. The wheelchair ramp installation crew arrived at dawn. I watched from the window as they measured and cut lumber, the sound of power tools drowning out the morning birds. Dad supervised every detail, checking angles and testing the surface. Emma sat in her temporary wheelchair on the porch, her hands gripping the armrests. Mom's car pulled up across the street. She sat there for 20 minutes just watching. Dad noticed but kept working with the crew. When Mom finally got out and approached, Dad intercepted her at the sidewalk. Their conversation lasted less than a minute before Mom stormed back to her car and sped away. Emma's first night home proved challenging. The hospital bed we'd rented barely fit in the converted dining room. She woke up crying 3 times, disoriented and calling for help. Each time, Dad or I rushed to her side. Grandma slept on the couch nearby, ready to assist. The next morning brought our first home physical therapy session. The therapist, a patient woman named Nicole, worked with Emma for an hour. She showed us exercises to help maintain muscle tone and prevent complications. Emma struggled through each movement, sweat beading on her forehead. Mom attempted another visit that afternoon. This time she brought Emma's favorite aunt, clearly hoping family pressure would grant her access. Dad stood firm at the door. The aunt looked uncomfortable, caught between family members. After they left, Dad found a gift bag on the porch containing expensive toys and a note begging for forgiveness. I returned to school reluctantly, worried about leaving Emma. My teachers had been informed about the situation, offering extensions on assignments. During lunch, I noticed Mom's car in the visitor parking lot. The principal later told me she'd tried to sign me out early, claiming a family emergency. Emma's progress remained slow. The tingling in her left foot came and went unpredictably. Some days she could wiggle her toes slightly. Other days brought no sensation at all. The physical therapist reminded us that spinal injuries were unpredictable, recovery non-linear. Dad discovered Mom had been calling Emma's doctors, pretending to be his assistant to get medical updates. The hospital tightened their information protocols after that. Only Dad could receive updates, and only in person with proper identification. Vlad spent weekends helping Dad modify the house for Emma's needs. They installed grab bars in the bathroom, widened doorways, and created smooth transitions between rooms. Emma watched from her wheelchair, occasionally pointing out where she needed extra support. Mom's tactics shifted. She started sending gifts through delivery services, stuffed animals, books, art supplies. Each package included letters professing her love and minimizing the incident. Dad photographed everything before storing it in the garage, building his documentation file. The medical bills kept mounting. Even with payment plans, the financial strain was obvious. Dad sold his motorcycle and took extra shifts when possible. Grandma contributed from her pension. We all made sacrifices, united in supporting Emma's recovery. Emma's emotional state fluctuated wildly. Some days she seemed almost like her old self, laughing at cartoons and playing with toys. Other days she barely spoke, staring at her motionless legs with hollow eyes. The trauma counselor visited twice a week, using play therapy to help her process. Mom showed up during one of Emma's physical therapy sessions. She'd somehow learned the schedule and waited until Dad stepped out to take a work call. Nicole immediately stopped the session and wheeled Emma to her bedroom while I blocked Mom's path. Her desperate pleas echoed through the house until Dad returned and escorted her out. The security cameras proved their worth repeatedly. They captured Mom attempting to enter through the back gate at night, testing windows, and even trying to befriend our elderly neighbor for house access. Dad compiled the footage, adding it to his ever-growing documentation. Emma's school situation required careful planning. She couldn't return to her regular classroom yet. The district provided a home tutor 3 days a week. Emma struggled with the change, missing her friends and normal routine. We arranged video calls with classmates, trying to maintain some normalcy. Mom's lawyer sent increasingly aggressive letters demanding access. They questioned Dad's decisions, implied neglect, and threatened various legal actions. Dad's lawyer responded with documentation of Mom's dangerous behavior and Emma's explicit fear of her mother. One morning, I found Mom had left dozens of printed photos under our door, pictures from before the accident, showing happy moments between her and Emma. The manipulation was obvious, but it still hurt seeing those memories weaponized. Emma achieved a major milestone in week 10. She stood with support for 30 seconds. The physical therapist helped her rise from the wheelchair using parallel bars. Her legs shook violently, but they held her weight. We all cried, including Nicole. Mom's social media campaign intensified. She created a blog detailing her wrongful separation from Emma, painting herself as a victim of Dad's controlling behavior. Friends and distant relatives started calling, having only heard Mom's version. Dad refused to engage publicly, focusing on Emma's care. The financial pressure forced difficult decisions. Dad considered selling the house for something smaller, more accessible for Emma. Vlad offered to buy Dad's truck and loan it back to him, a gesture that brought Dad to tears. Mom's playing lawyer ping pong while Emma's learning to walk again. Talk about priorities getting as twisted as a pretzel in a blender. The security cameras catching her window shopping at midnight like some discount burglar really shows her problem-solving skills. We were running out of resources. Emma's progress plateaued frustratingly. The initial improvements stalled, leaving her with minimal sensation and no functional movement below the knees. The doctors adjusted expectations, talking about permanent accommodations rather than full recovery. Mom attempted to ambush us at a medical appointment. She waited in the parking garage, garage, approaching as Dad transferred Emma from car to wheelchair. Emma started hyperventilating, her whole body shaking. Security intervened while I comforted Emma, but the damage was done. She refused to leave the house for days afterward. Grandma's health began declining from the stress. She developed high blood pressure and needed her own medical appointments. The role reversal was hard. She'd come to help us, but now needed care herself. Dad hired a part-time aide, another expense we couldn't afford. Emma's birthday approached, her first since the accident. She asked for a small celebration, just family. When she specifically said no, Mommy, it broke my heart. We planned a quiet party with her favorite cake and a few presents we'd scraped together. Mom discovered the birthday plan through social media. A cousin had innocently mentioned it. She showed up with an enormous gift and demanded entry. Dad physically blocked the door while she screamed accusations. Emma heard everything from her room, sobbing into her pillow. The incident prompted Dad to seek a restraining order. The lawyer said we had enough documentation, but the process would take time. Meanwhile, Mom's harassment continued through every available channel. Emma started having nightmares about water. She'd wake up gasping, feeling like she was drowning. The trauma counselor increased sessions, but progress was slow. Emma refused to take baths, only allowing quick showers while gripping safety bars. Mom recruited flying monkeys, friends and relatives who believed her version of events. They called constantly, sent messages, and even showed up at our door. Each interaction drained our energy, time we needed for Emma's care. Vlad discovered Mom had been spreading rumors at Dad's workplace, claiming he was abusive and controlling. Dad's boss, fortunately, knew the truth and supported him, but the whispers and stares from co-workers added another layer of stress. Emma's small improvements became our lifeline. She learned to transfer herself from bed to wheelchair with minimal help. She could shower sitting down with grab bars. Each tiny independence victory felt monumental. Mom's attempts grew more creative and disturbing. She hired a private investigator to photograph our daily routines. She sent Emma's former babysitter to check on things. She even contacted my school counselor with concerns about my home life. The breaking point came during Emma's pool therapy session. It was her first time near water since the accident, a carefully controlled therapeutic environment. Emma was making progress, floating with support, when Mom appeared at the pool's glass viewing window. Emma saw her and panicked, inhaling water and choking. The therapist pulled her out immediately, but Emma was hysterical, fighting anyone who tried to touch her. The session ended with Emma vomiting from fear and refusing to continue therapy. Dad finally snapped. He confronted Mom in the parking lot while I stayed with Emma. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Dad's controlled fury, Mom's dramatic gestures, and eventually her speeding away. Dad returned shaking with rage. That night, we held an emergency family meeting. Dad, Grandma, Vlad, and I discussed options while Emma slept. The situation was unsustainable. Mom's escalating behavior was undoing Emma's progress. We needed a permanent solution. Vlad suggested moving out of state, starting fresh where Mom couldn't follow. Grandma worried about Emma's medical team and established care. Dad researched legal options in other jurisdictions. I just wanted Emma to feel safe again. Emma must have overheard because she wheeled herself out, tears streaming. She begged us not to make her leave her doctors, her room, the only stability she had left. We promised to find another way. Dad spent the next days on the phone with lawyers, social workers, and advocacy groups. The restraining order paperwork moved forward slowly. Mom's lawyer fought every step, demanding psychological evaluations and supervised visitation. Mom's behavior suggested she was unraveling. Her social media posts became increasingly incoherent. She posted old videos of Emma walking, running, jumping, all the things she'd stolen from her. The cruelty was breathtaking. One afternoon, while Dad was at a legal meeting and Grandma napped, I heard a noise in the backyard. Through the window, I saw Mom trying to dismantle a section of our new fence. She was crying, pulling at boards with her bare hands. I called Dad immediately and kept Emma distracted in her room. By the time Dad arrived with Vlad, Mom had bloodied her hands on the fence. They found her collapsed in the yard, sobbing about needing to see her baby. The police came this time. Mom was taken for psychiatric evaluation. Dad struggled with conflicting emotions, anger at what she'd done to Emma, but sadness at her obvious mental deterioration. We all felt the weight of how wrong everything had gone. Emma sensed the shift in the house that evening. She asked if Mommy was sick, if that's why she did bad things. We tried to explain mental health in terms a 7-year-old could understand while validating her fear and anger. The psychiatric hold lasted 72 hours. During that time, we experienced something we'd almost forgotten: peace. Emma relaxed slightly, participated more in therapy, even smiled during a video call with school friends. When Mom was released, she'd been prescribed medication and mandatory therapy. Her lawyer contacted Dad about a proposed agreement. Mom would stay away if Dad dropped the restraining order pursuit. Dad refused, knowing we needed legal protection. Emma's recovery took a positive turn during Mom's absence. She regained more sensation in her left foot and could move her toes deliberately. The physical therapist was cautiously optimistic about potential partial mobility with intensive therapy. We used the calm period to establish better routines. Emma started online school sessions, connecting with her teacher and classmates regularly. She joined a virtual support group for children with spinal injuries. Slowly, she was building a new normal. Mom's return to harassment was swift but different. The medication seemed to dull her intensity but not her determination. She sent letters through her lawyer proposing various compromises: supervised visits, phone calls, even just sending letters to Emma. Dad consulted Emma's trauma counselor about the proposals. The counselor was clear. Emma wasn't ready for any contact. The fear was still too fresh, the trauma too recent. Forcing interaction could cause serious setbacks. We focused on small victories. Emma learned to cook simple meals from her wheelchair. She started drawing again, though her pictures were notably darker than before. She even laughed at Dad's terrible jokes occasionally. The restraining order hearing approached. Dad prepared meticulously, organizing evidence and witness statements. Vlad took time off work to testify. Even some neighbors offered to speak about what they'd witnessed. Mom hired a new lawyer, someone known for aggressive tactics. They filed counter motions, demanded access to Emma's medical records, and questioned Dad's fitness as a parent. The legal maneuvering was exhausting. Emma's 8th birthday was 6 months away, but she was already worried about it. She made me promise to help Dad keep Mommy away. The fact that a 7-year-old was planning defense strategies for her own birthday broke my heart. Physical therapy yielded incremental progress. Emma could stand for 2 minutes with support. She had sensation in both feet, though motor control remained limited. Each session pushed her limits, leaving her exhausted but determined. Mom's mother, our other grandmother, finally reached out. She'd been getting only Mom's version of events and was shocked by the truth. She offered to help however she could, even if it meant testifying about her daughter's behavior. The family fractures spread wider. Relatives chose sides based on incomplete information. Holiday planning became a minefield. Emma asked why some cousins didn't visit anymore, another loss in her changed world. Dad's employer offered permanent remote work to help with Emma's care. The flexibility was crucial for appointments and therapy sessions. His co-workers organized meal deliveries and gift cards, small kindnesses that meant everything. Emma developed coping mechanisms, some healthy and some concerning. She insisted on checking door locks repeatedly. She kept a whistle by her bed. She made me promise never to leave her alone with Mommy, even though we assured her it wouldn't happen. The restraining order hearing was postponed when Mom's lawyer filed for more preparation time. The delay frustrated everyone, but our lawyer assured us it would ultimately strengthen our case. More time meant more documentation of Mom's continued harassment. Emma's progress inspired us all. She learned to navigate curbs in her wheelchair. She could shower independently with safety equipment. She even started talking about returning to school part-time next year. Mom's attempts to circumvent our boundaries grew more creative. She sent packages to Emma's friends' houses, hoping they'd deliver them. She volunteered at community events, knowing we might attend. She was everywhere and nowhere, a constant threat. The day before the rescheduled hearing, Mom made her boldest move yet. She arrived with a moving truck, claiming she was taking her belongings from the house. Dad called the police while I kept Emma calm in her room. Mom's using a moving truck like it's some kind of custody Uber. Pretty sure that's not how joint property works, but okay. The timing right before court is chef's kiss level of making your own case worse. The officers reviewed the situation and prevented Mom from entering. She screamed about her rights, her property, her daughter. Emma heard it all, despite our efforts. The trauma counselor had to do an emergency session that night. As we prepared for the hearing, I reflected on our new reality. Emma was stronger than any 7-year-old should have to be. Dad had aged years and months. Grandma's health remained fragile. We were surviving, but at such a cost. The hearing would determine our immediate future, but the long term remained uncertain. Emma might never walk normally again. Mom's mental health seemed to be deteriorating. Our family was forever changed by one person's desperate need to be the fun parent. But we had each other. We had small victories and growing hope. Emma was alive, getting stronger, learning to navigate her new reality. The battle wasn't over, but we were still fighting. The hearing morning arrived with unexpected complications. Mom's new lawyer filed an emergency motion claiming Dad had hidden assets. The judge postponed proceedings to review financial documents. Dad's hands shook as he gathered bank statements, tax returns, and receipts showing every penny spent on Emma's care. During the delay, Mom attempted contact through Emma's physical therapist. She'd called the therapy center pretending to be updating insurance information, then broke down crying about missing her daughter. Nicole professionally declined to relay messages but warned us about the breach. Emma's anxiety spiked with the hearing postponement. She barely slept, constantly checking that her bedroom door was locked. I found her practicing wheelchair maneuvers at 3 a.m., preparing escape routes in case Mom somehow got inside. The trauma counselor added emergency sessions. 2 days before the rescheduled hearing, Vlad discovered Mom had been photographing our house from various angles. The neighbor's security camera caught her measuring distances from the street to Emma's window. Dad immediately moved Emma's bed away from all windows and installed blackout curtains. The financial review revealed Mom had opened credit cards in Dad's name, maxing them out on cash advances. $23,000 in debt we didn't know existed. Dad's lawyer scrambled to add fraud documentation to our case, while Dad spent hours on the phone with credit agencies. Emma's physical therapy suffered. She couldn't focus on exercises, constantly watching the door. Her progress reversed. The 2-minute standing record dropped to 30 seconds. Nicole suggested postponing sessions until after the legal situation stabilized, but Emma insisted on continuing. Mom's mother visited unexpectedly, bringing disturbing news. She'd found journals at Mom's apartment detailing elaborate plans to rescue Emma. The entries included researched wheelchair-accessible routes to the Canadian border and lists of medications that could sedate a child. Grandma turned everything over to Dad's lawyer. The night before the hearing, none of us slept. Emma had panic attacks every few hours. Dad paced the house checking locks and cameras. I sat in Emma's doorway, watching her fitful sleep. Grandma made endless cups of tea nobody drank. Court day began with Mom arriving in a wheelchair, claiming stress-induced paralysis. Her lawyer argued she needed accommodation and understanding, not restriction. The judge ordered medical verification. Mom miraculously stood when the bailiff mentioned calling paramedics. Dad presented our evidence methodically. Security footage, medical records, financial fraud documentation, witness statements. The judge's expression grew increasingly grim as the pattern emerged. Mom's lawyer tried interrupting repeatedly but was shut down. Emma's testimony came via video link from a secure room. She spoke clearly about her fear, the nightmares, the accident. When asked if she wanted to see Mom, Emma's whole body trembled as she shook her head. The judge noted her obvious distress. Mom's testimony unraveled quickly. She contradicted herself about the quarry incident, claiming claimed the roof access was safe, insisted the axe wound was exaggerated. When shown photos of Emma's injuries, she blamed Dad for not supervising better. Her lawyer visibly winced. The judge called a recess after Mom's outburst about being the victim. During the break, Mom cornered me in the hallway bathroom. She grabbed my shoulders, begging me to tell the judge Emma needed her mother. Security removed her when I screamed. Vlad testified about Mom's attempts to access the house, showing footage from cameras she didn't know existed. The judge watched Mom testing windows at 2 a.m., trying to pick locks, even attempting to bribe the mailman for a key. Each video strengthened our case. Nicole provided professional testimony about Emma's regression during Mom's contact attempts. She explained how Emma's physical progress directly correlated with feeling safe. The medical evidence was clear. Mom's presence actively harmed Emma's recovery. Mom's final witness, a friend who'd only heard her version, crumbled under cross-examination. She admitted she'd never actually seen Mom with Emma post-accident, had only heard Mom's stories. She left the stand looking shaken, realizing she'd been manipulated. The judge's decision came swiftly. Permanent restraining order, no contact until Emma turned 18. Mom screamed about her rights, her love, her baby. The bailiffs moved closer as she advanced toward Dad. Her lawyer physically held her back. Outside the courthouse, Mom made one last attempt. She broke free from her lawyer and ran toward Dad's car where Emma waited. I threw myself between them while Dad started the engine. Mom pounded on my back, screaming Emma's name, until police intervened. The drive home was silent except for Emma's quiet sobs. She'd heard everything through the car windows. Dad reached back to hold her hand while I rubbed her shoulders. Grandma waited on the porch, her face asking questions we'd answer later. That night, Emma slept peacefully for the first time in months. No checking locks, no nightmares, no panic. Dad sat outside her door anyway, finally allowing himself to cry. The battle was won, but the cost was staggering. Mom's harassment didn't end immediately. She sent letters through various relatives, created fake social media accounts, even hired a plane to fly a banner over our house. Each violation was documented and reported. Her own lawyer eventually dropped her as a client. Emma's recovery accelerated without the constant fear. She stood for 5 minutes within a week. Her toes responded more consistently. Nicole cried happy tears when Emma took a supported step using parallel bars. Hope crept back into our lives. The financial aftermath took months to resolve. Dad fought every fraudulent charge while managing Emma's medical expenses. Vlad organized a fundraiser that helped cover therapy costs. The community support overwhelmed us. People who'd watched Mom's descent wanted to help. Emma's emotional healing progressed slowly. She still startled at unexpected noises and insisted on seeing who was at the door before opening it. But she smiled more, laughed at movies, even asked about returning to school for art class. 6 months after the hearing, Mom was arrested for violating the restraining order. She'd been caught on school property during Emma's virtual graduation ceremony. The criminal charges finally stopped her attempts. Prison became her new reality. Emma learned to walk with forearm crutches, defying the initial prognosis. Each step required enormous effort, but she persisted. The day she walked across her bedroom unassisted, we all sobbed. She'd never run or jump again, but she could walk. Dad slowly rebuilt our financial stability. He took a promotion requiring more hours but allowing remote work. The balance wasn't perfect, but Emma never lacked care or support. We learned to function as a smaller, stronger family unit. Emma's 9th birthday arrived peacefully. She requested a pool party, facing her water fear directly. With her crutches set aside, she floated with friends, laughing. The joy on her face erased months of pain. She was healing, truly healing. Mom's letters from prison went unanswered. Emma made that choice independently, asking Dad to return them unopened. She focused on moving forward, not dwelling on the past. Her strength amazed everyone who knew our story. The house modifications became permanent fixtures. What started as emergency adaptations evolved into Emma's personalized space. She decorated her room with artwork created during recovery, each piece showing her journey from darkness to hope. Emma returned to school part-time, using a combination of wheelchair and crutches. Her classmates welcomed her warmly. She joined the art club and student newspaper, finding new ways to express herself. Normal felt different, but possible. 2 years post-accident, Emma competed in an adaptive sports event. Watching her race in her wheelchair, determination etched on her face, I saw the fighter she'd become. She didn't win, but her smile crossing the finish line was victorious. Dad found love again with a physical therapist from the hospital. She understood our family's scars and brought patience and warmth. Emma approved after careful observation, even asking if she could be in the wedding. Healing happened in unexpected ways. Mom's release date loomed eventually, but we were ready. Legal protections remained in place. Emma, now 12, felt secure in her identity beyond the trauma. She knew Mom might try returning, but also knew we'd protect her. Our family looked different than before. Smaller, scarred, but unbreakable. Emma walked with crutches but stood tall. Dad carried stress lines but smiled freely. Grandma moved slower but remained our foundation. I grew up faster than planned, but found purpose in protecting my sister. The cost of Mom's desperate need to be the fun parent was measured in Emma's steps, Dad's gray hair, and Grandma's medication bottles. But we survived. More than that, we learned to thrive within our new reality. Emma's laughter returned, different but genuine. That victory mattered most. Thanks for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate you letting me tag along to reflect and take it all in with you. Until next time, take care of yourself out there. Subscribe for more content like this.